If you grew up in the 90s, you remember some of those cartoons that define your childhood. But what if I told you there were some shows so weird, surreal, and psychedelic that they broke the internet before it even existed? If you think you've seen it all, get ready to dive into a world where animation pushed every boundary imaginable, where humor didn't make sense, and where reality and fantasy collided in ways you never imagined. Today, we're talking about the 7 most psychedelic cartoons of the 90s, the ones that didn't just break the mold, they shattered it. Keep watching because this is a ride you won't want to miss. Liquid television was unlike anything viewers had seen before, a collection of experimental animated shorts. It broke every rule of traditional TV animation, giving birth to surreal, visually striking works of art. This was the show that introduced Aeon Flux to the world, a series that would go on to define avant-garde animation for years to come. The show's animation was unconventional, using distorted and fluid styles that made everything feel dreamlike, often abstract, and never predictable. Each short was an exploration of new animation techniques, vibrant colors, and unpredictable storytelling. Characters often looked strange, moving in ways that didn't seem to follow the normal rules of physics. The narrative, it wasn't always linear or easy to understand, but that was part of its charm. The impact of liquid television on the animation world was profound. It showed that animation wasn't just for kids, it could be a medium for exploring complex, adult themes. This anthology paved the way for later shows like Beavis and Butt-Head and the Max, which embraced unconventional styles and themes. But more than that, liquid television was a playground for animators to experiment, making it a cornerstone of 90s alternative animation.
Hey, are you enjoying this trip down memory lane? Then what are you waiting for? If you haven't subscribed yet, now's your chance. Remember, the 90s nostalgia doesn't stop here. Subscribe now and don't miss out on any of this amazing journey of memories and fun. Because if you grew up in the 90s, you know these memories shouldn't be forgotten. They deserve to be celebrated. And for that, you need to be part of everything we're bringing. Let's relive everything that made that decade unforgettable. Hit that subscribe button and join this journey.
Beavis and Butt-Head was a cultural phenomenon that defined a generation of misfits. Created by Mike Judge, this show wasn't about deep plots or moral lessons. It was crude, chaotic, and unapologetically immature. Beavis and Butt-Head were the teenage boys with a love for heavy metal music and a complete lack of common sense. Their idiotic antics and unintelligible laughter became iconic, making them the perfect example of the absurd humor of the 90s. The animation style was intentionally simplistic, using crude drawings and minimalistic designs to mirror the characters' simple, ridiculous world. But the real genius of the show lay in its commentary on society. Through their interactions with pop culture, especially music videos, Beavis and Butt-Head reflected the apathy and disillusionment that defined many of the youth of that era. Their ignorant yet hilarious take on the world was both a satire of teenage angst and the mirror to the senselessness of popular culture. What made Beavis and Butt-Head stand out was its irreverence. It didn't care about being politically correct or conforming to societal expectations. It was edgy, wild, and captured the rebellious spirit of the 90s. The show wasn't just a cartoon. It was a snapshot of a generation that was ready to laugh at the chaos and confusion of the world around them. Imagine a world where logic doesn't exist, where every frame on your screen bends reality, and where the humor shifts from pure madness to something so uncomfortable you almost can't look away. That was Ren and Stimpy, a cartoon that didn't just push animation's boundaries, it shattered them. If you thought you'd seen it all, Ren and Stimpy was here to prove that the impossible was just the beginning. Every episode was a mind-bending ride where nothing made sense, but everything felt absolutely right. Ren, the neurotic chihuahua, and Stimpy, the blissfully clueless cat, didn't just find themselves in absurd situations. They turned the world around them into a psychedelic nightmare, with exaggerated animations, vibrant colors, and characters that bordered on grotesque. Ren and Stimpy was more than just a cartoon. It was a manifesto that cartoons in the 90s could be absurd, funny, and at times, unsettling. But don't be fooled, the weirdness wasn't just visual. The humor was as unpredictable as the episodes themselves. 1 minute, you're laughing at the insane antics, and the next, you're questioning how a cartoon could be so strange. Ren and Stimpy wasn't just a show, it was a fever dream in color, a burst of creativity without limits, and a journey into the twisted minds of its creators. For many, it was the calling card of the 90s, showing that animation could be anything but predictable. Freakazoid was pure chaos wrapped in animation. Created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, the same minds behind Batman, the animated series. This show broke every rule of traditional superhero cartoons. It wasn't just a parody of the superhero genre, it was a complete deconstruction of it, blending fast-paced humor, absurdity, and a constant barrage of random gags that never gave you a chance to catch your breath. The protagonist, Freakazoid, was a typical geek turned unlikely superhero after a freak accident with a computer. He had no real powers except for his ability to break the fourth wall, defy logic, and throw his own narrative into complete disarray. The show wasn't about saving the world from evil. It was about taking the superhero trope to its most bizarre extremes, with ridiculous villains like the Lobe, who was just a giant brain with a face, and nonsensical plots that made no sense whatsoever. Freakazoid was an animated roller coaster that never slowed down. Its animation was wild and erratic, with characters that often shifted in and out of exaggerated expressions and movements, matching the tone of the show. The humor ranged from slapstick to clever wordplay, making it accessible for both kids and adults. But above all, Freakazoid was a show that didn't take itself seriously. It invited you to laugh at the chaos, to embrace the randomness, and to enjoy the complete absurdity of it all. Freakazoid wasn't just a cartoon, it was a statement. A show that proved animation could be as unpredictable and weird as the world around it, giving birth to one of the most off-the-wall, quirky characters to ever grace the small screen asterisk. Daria was the perfect reflection of the disillusioned teen spirit of the 90s. Created by Glenn Eichler and Susie Lewis-Lynn, this animated series was a sharp contrast to the typical cartoons of its time, which often focused on slapstick comedy and fantastical plots. Instead, Daria brought a refreshingly cynical and intellectual perspective, featuring a protagonist who was sarcastic, intelligent, and incredibly relatable to anyone who had ever felt like an outsider. Daria Morgendorffer, the titular character, was the embodiment of the frustrated, misunderstood teen, surrounded by the absurdity of high school life and the shallow characters around her. Daria's deadpan delivery and quick wit made her stand out in a world that seemed to obsess with fitting in. Her commentary on the ridiculousness of teen culture, consumerism, and the adult world was razor sharp, but it was always delivered with a dry humor that made even the harshest critiques feel like a punchline. The animation style was simple but effective, with clean lines and a muted color palette that matched the show's tone, understated, but always with a sharp edge. It wasn't about over-the-top expressions or exaggerated action scenes. Daria relied on sharp dialogue, clever observations, and subtle visual gags to carry its humor. Daria wasn't just a cartoon, it was a voice for an entire generation of teens who felt out of place in a world that seemed obsessed with image and conformity. Its wit, its social commentary, and its portrayal of a teenager's complex inner life made it stand out as one of the most intelligent and influential animated series of the 90s. Cow and Chicken was a show like no other. Created by David Feiss, this animated series blended absurdity, dark humor, and surrealism, making it one of the most memorable and unconventional cartoons of the 90s. The premise was simple. A cow named Cow and her brother, Chicken, a human-chicken hybrid, live with their bizarre parents who, for reasons never explained, have no upper bodies. The humor in Cow and Chicken was unapologetically outrageous, from the bizarre characters to the off-the-wall situations. The show had a unique energy that made it stand out. It often involved strange and sometimes inappropriate humor, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in children's programming at the time. One of the recurring characters, the villainous the Red Guy, was a shape-shifting trickster who would often make things even weirder with his antics. The animation style was deliberately crude, matching the chaotic and unconventional world the characters inhabited. There were no attempts at realism or logical explanations. Everything was just offbeat and exaggerated. The show's unpredictable nature kept viewers on their toes, not knowing what absurdity would come next. Cow and Chicken was the epitome of 90s animation, wild, free-spirited, and completely unrestrained. More than just a comedy, the show was a reflection of the time, a generation that was starting to crave humor that was less sanitized and more real, even if that meant embracing the bizarre and the strange. Cow and Chicken wasn't just a cartoon. It was an experience of absurdity, where the weirdness of the world was front and center. Space Ghost Coast to Coast was a groundbreaking show that defied all expectations of what a talk show could be. Created by Mike Lazzo, this animated series took a campy, 60s superhero character, Space Ghost, and turned him into a sarcastic, deadpan talk show host. The result, a strange, surreal, and absolutely hilarious series that would go on to influence the world of animated comedy for years to come. The show revolved around Space Ghost hosting a late-night talk show with interviews featuring real-life guests. The twist was that Space Ghost wasn't a conventional host. He was a superhero who couldn't get anything right. His interactions with his bandleader, Zorak, a giant praying mantis, and his producer, Molter, were chaotic, weird, and often completely nonsensical. This absurdity, combined with the bizarre animation style, created a unique form of comedy that was unlike anything on TV at the time. The animation was minimalist, with simple backgrounds and characters often stuck in static poses, which only added to the absurdity of the show. The real brilliance of Space Ghost Coast to Coast was in its dialogue. The show was full of offbeat humor, often relying on the awkwardness of its animated setting to generate laughs. Guests were usually confused, awkward, or downright uncomfortable as they tried to navigate the bizarre world of Space Ghosts. Annex. What made Space Ghost Coast to Coast so unique was its ability to blend the absurdity of cartoons with the format of a talk show, creating a completely new genre of animated television. It was unpredictable, irreverent, and unlike anything else on TV, and it became a cult classic that influenced shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and The Brak Show. It wasn't just a show, it was a parody of itself, a postmodern experiment in comedy and animation.
Did you enjoy reliving those moments from the 90s? The nostalgia of that era is more alive than ever, and I'm sure you've got some amazing stories and memories from that time that shaped so many generations. If you love revisiting the best of the 90s as much as we do, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Tell us, what was your favorite product from that era? Or what 90s memory still makes you smile today? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any content packed with nostalgia. Let's keep these memories alive. See you in the next video, where we'll continue to travel through time and rescue everything that made the 90s so special.